fivefold, etc. And then it tailed off over a period of time. This is on the elbow, and this is really significant in terms of we knew that this event was coming a couple of days before. We work with Alberta Environment and get as much information as we can. From an operating perspective, we had drawn down the Glenmore Reservoir to get as much capacity as we could. But what happened, it went from basically around 30 or 40 cubic meters per second up to 1,200 cubic meters per second. It filled the storage in the Glenmore Reservoir and overtopped in about 6 hours. If you go back, if you look at, remember the last slide, it was it was still a steep rise, but it plateaued for a little while. And some of that you need to remember is that because of TransAlta upstream, they are the ones who are controlling the flow that gets released down into Calgary. So we work with them very closely through that event and in other events so that we can at least try and store as much in the watershed as we can. As I said, this was a very peaky event, and we saw the result of that in Bragg Creek. We saw the result of that downstream. So what we were able to do, what this map shows, is that we were able to attenuate this peak of 1,200 to round about just below 700. This 1,200 is a 1 in 500 year event. That's the most significant event we've had on the elbow in over 100 years. But we were able to control it to 700 because of the storage we were able to provide. Then again, it kept at 700 for a while and then tailed off. So the 1 in 700, the 700 CMS is around about 1 in 100 year event. So we were able to bring it down from a 1 in 500 to a 1 in 100 by using the storage that we were able to get. Go back to this one, but we've included this one, the 2013 event. This is it here. So you can see this is the bulb of the elbow. It was around about a 100-year event. Still not as high as what we know happened in the early part of the last century and the century before, but quite a ways above the 2005. I'm not being flippant when I say that this 2005 was the rehearsal for this one. This could be the rehearsal for another one. On the elbow, again, you can see we've had nothing over the history of the recorded flows on the elbow of the magnitude of what we got. The 1 in 500 year event. In terms of the recovery, just some information here. There was 26 communities affected, 110,000 Calgarians, more than 20 bridges were affected, 30 parks, 50 bus routes. Information about the flood that I won't belabor. The recovery is going on. There are things going on relative to the LRT, relative to the water system, bank erosion. There was significant bank erosion that affected some of the utilities. We know the bridges are being inspected for their stability. We saw what happened during the event with the CP bridge and that derailment. We were very fortunate not to have had a major disaster from that. When I was in the emergency operating center when that derailment took place, and I was absolutely in awe at how the Calgary Emergency Management Agency kicked into action for that. We have something behind us that is truly amazing in terms of responding to these types of events. So next steps, that's what most of you are here to hear about. As I said, the recovery is underway. What we've done is come up with a program called the River Flood Mitigation Program. This is about resiliency. Are we better prepared for next time? How do we make Calgary more resilient for the next time? And I keep saying for the next time because we know it will happen. Will it happen tomorrow? Will it happen next year? Will it happen 10 years from now? I don't know, but that's not relevant. I don't believe we need to be prepared. It's not that we weren't prepared for this event. The emergency response was really, really good. So the mitigation program, what's it about? It's really about reviewing our flood response measures and mitigation efforts that we can put in. It's about investigating ways of reducing and managing river flood risks to Calgary in the future. This is about going forward. We are working in close collaboration with the province. We've already had one meeting, and we will have several more. We're working very closely with them. The scope of the program, and there's a lot of words on there, and it really does cover a lot in terms of lines of inquiry. What we want to do is kind of look at everything that we can relative to how we can better prepare, how we can mitigate it. And it's about local flood protection, so protecting areas like Sunnyside and Bowness and those are the communities that are along the Bow. It's about looking at water storage and diversion options even outside of the city limits. It's about drainage infrastructure standards. Maybe we need to change some of those standards. It's about the critical infrastructure, not only our critical infrastructure, but the private infrastructure as well. When you think in the other public sectors, when you look at what was affected this time, downtown was significantly affected. Hospitals, there's communication, transportation, all of those things. This program is not looking just at City of Calgary infrastructure. Land use and building regulations, is there some things that we need to do on that? Do we need to put bylaws in place so that the generators and electrical panels are above a certain level that they're currently down in parkades? Do we need to do something about that? We have very good river modeling and forecasting that leads into flood mapping. But do we need to take those to the next level? As I mentioned before, we're working constantly when these events are coming on with the province, with TransAlta, because we're talking about how is this system going to respond, so how can we better manage that? Do we need to improve our communication channels between these organizations? Weather prediction, river flow monitoring, interagency cooperation I talked about. Weather prediction and how changing climate is going to impact that. We need to probably do some more research on that. There's a lot of research going on at the national level. Can we bring it down to the regional level so it's a little bit more meaningful in the predictions for flooding? Impact of climate, changing climate. And then there is residual risk management. I honestly don't like the word prevent. We cannot prevent these events. We cannot control what Mother Nature is going to put at us to the level that we maybe would. There's always going to be risk. How do we manage that risk? We as governments, you as citizens can go so far to protect our property, to protect your property. But there may be an event that is larger than the one that we're designing for. How do we manage that residual risk? First step that we did was to convene an expert management panel, and they're the ones that they're going to guide this process for the city. They are well-known experts in their fields, not just in engineering, but in the social side of things as well. And they're going to guide this process. They will provide some recommendations that the city can action through infrastructure investments, changes to design specifications, procedures and policies. As I said before, we will be working with the province because there's some things that are a provincial jurisdiction, some things that are a municipal jurisdiction. These are the panel members, some of which may be familiar to some of you. They are a wide-ranging experience from these folks. So I won't belabor that. I've got bios on them if anybody is interested, and I can provide those. Coming out of that are some task forces. We've now got 3 task forces that we've identified. The first one being mostly around changing climate, watershed management, and event forecasting. And I'll just touch briefly on the watershed management piece. We are responsible for within the city boundary, but there's a huge watershed out there. What can be done to influence what is outside of the city boundary? Working with the province, working with other agencies to try and see what we can do. Does that involve looking at logging practices? Does it involve looking at how the watershed is being developed? We know, for example, at Canmore, I'm not picking on Canmore, but it's a growing community. It's probably going to continue to grow. That impacts what goes into the river, same as we impact what goes into the river for downstream of us. So how can we work together so on a watershed basis so that we're making the right decisions for the safety and the health of the citizens and of Alberta. The task force number 2 is mostly around engineering. I mentioned about different storage options that may be available, diversion of flows that helps protect Calgary in particular a little bit better, and then protection, which is kind of the standard, river erosion type berms to stop water getting out of the river and into the communities. Task force number 3 is about the resiliency piece, not just our infrastructure, but private property. How can we make those things? How can we work with the business sector, for example, to say, look, this would help you be more resilient for the next event? And then the residual risk management piece. So the task forces, there'll be 2 pieces actually. There's the expert side of things, and then there's the public side of things. There is an expression of interest that is going to be going out for experts in the subject areas. So those areas that I mentioned about changing climate, diversion storage, those types of things, we're looking for experts to come in and help us with this. We don't have all of the answers. They'll bring specific expert knowledge to us. They'll be able to identify any gaps in knowledge that needs to be addressed, and they'll make recommendations on the work plan going forward, and they'll review the task force. With the public, we want the public to be involved in this. We know that there are many observations, those that were affected during the event. We need to know what they saw. The public has ideas as to how we can do a better job of dealing with these floods. So there will be an expression of interest for that. As far as the task force is concerned, we haven't decided how many members of the public are on those 3 task forces. It won't be, it'll be open to everybody, but there will be a decision made as to who is going to represent the general public on those task forces. But as far as the general input, we're going to create a website so they can share their flood experiences and also any ideas that they may have. And we know there's lots of ideas out there as to how we can do better. Timelines. The program is expected to run until mid next year, July 2014, because it really does feed into some of the recommendations. How's that going to impact the next business cycle for the city? Our current business plan runs to the end of 2014. The next one will run from 2014 to 2018. It's a 4-year business plan, this one. What comes out of this will feed very much into that business plan for 14 to 18. So what's underway? We're already reviewing options to increase Glenmore Reservoir storage. We've hired a consultant to look